Welcome back to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Walt, and I am joined by the bass-slaying man himself, Chase from Central Florida. Dude, 82 days. No, actually, let me rephrase that. 80 days until Georgia's deer season pops off, and it's time to start really thinking about whitetails.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's I don't think it's slowly creeping up on us anymore at this point. I keep thinking, I was like, whoa, this is actually getting a lot closer than I even thought it was. It's the excitement's coming. My buddies have started talking about hunting some here and there, and just discussions on what we're going to do this season. So that's always fun. I just got my tethered Phantom, and I was playing out in the yard with it earlier. So I'm hoping I can get some information and get it out to the listeners. And I think we're going to do a video on it, and we've got a giveaway on the tethered Phantom as well. So I think all that's is going to kind of come to a head here soon.
Man, look at you, just like that, y'all. A golf clap for Chase's seamless segue between pieces there, man. He's killing it today. You ate your Wheaties today.
I did, man. I did. I did.
Oh man, yeah, dude. We are gonna do a video on it. I'm excited about that. We are giving one away. And you know what? Since we're on this topic, why don't we thank the people who got 10 additional entries for the tethered Phantom that we're giving away. Now, before I say what that is, Patreon is how you support this show. You, the listener, can support the show, I should say. And that money goes right into operating costs. It goes into travel costs. It goes into the hosting fees, all of that stuff. And one of the ways that we say thank you is through quarterly giveaways. And this quarter, we're giving away, as Chase said, the Phantom. And there's two ways to enter. You can go to our Facebook or Instagram posts and find the post where we're doing the giveaway. Tag a friend to get entered. But if you are a Patreon subscriber during this period, you get 10 additional entries. So we have got to announce 6 new Patreon subscribers. You ready for this, Chase?
Let's do it.
Everett Park, Tyler Jackson, Tony Smith, Brian Stanton, Kevin Prosser, and Chris Massery. McCary, maybe. For all of you, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Thank you for supporting the show. We have got a bunch of stickers. We've got 50 stickers on the way to send out to you guys to say thanks. They look really cool. I got the proof yesterday. They should be here Thursday, and then I'll start sending those out. And yeah, man, dude, it is gear season. It is tactics and gear season, and that's what this episode is about: is silencing your gear.
Yeah, it is. It was a great episode. It kind of reiterated to me that, hey, I need to be paying more attention to sound as a whole.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we get kind of some tunnel vision on wind and our scent. Like scent kind of gets hammered so much, but the sound aspect, another one of their key senses that a deer has, doesn't really get hit as hard. And I think that'll come through on this episode on how important it is to pay attention to the noises you're making in the woods.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things. We think about every avenue of ways that we can be better hunter. We shoot all year long. We tune our arrows. I mean, God, guys, if you think about everything that we do to get in position to kill a big whitetail, the idea that you could ruin that by clinking two things together, and it's not a far cry for me to say that, this is perhaps the most underappreciated discussion piece in whitetail hunting right now. I mean, everyone just assumes that noise is detrimental, but I think after listening to this episode, they're going to realize that it is perhaps the most important thing when finalizing your setup is getting it as quiet as possible.
Yeah, it is, and I don't think it takes that much time to go in and make sure that your gear is quiet or silent. It's not something that's going to take somebody a lot of time to go in and do that. On this podcast, you'll find out about a product that can help you with that.
I think that's a good stopping point. So why don't we let everybody listen to Adam from Sound Barrier Hunting about why and how to silence your hunting gear.
Let's do it.
All right, we have got a guest that is tuning in all the way from the Great White North, the land of milk and honey, big bucks around every corner. Adam Lewis, dude, thank you for taking time out your evening to talk with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, and not sure about what you just said, but yeah, we have some deer up here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. At least you get more meat off of your deer. You might not get as much, antler growth as you want, but I bet you a field dressed deer up there is probably still twice as big as the ones I shoot down here.
Yeah, if I don't sweat as much up here. So
Oh man, so tonight's gonna be a really fun episode for a variety of reasons. One, I always love talking to people who are dedicated to a component of their craft. You've got guys that are trail camera experts and gear layering experts. You've got all these guys who really have honed in on certain things. And tonight we're going to be talking about sound, which is kind of weird because we talked, offline before we started this. Everybody acknowledges that sound while deer hunting is important, but we don't do a good enough job talking about it, if you ask me. And this is actually something that I kind of slept on until this year myself. I mean, I obviously try and be quiet, but I don't take it to the extreme that I think I really need to. But before we get to that, Adam, why don't you give everybody the elevator pitch? Who are you? What are your favorite pursuits? And kind of give everybody the 411.
sure. So grew up in Michigan here, which is a big hunting state. Everybody deer hunts at least on some level, and a lot of deer, but also a lot of hunters. So it's really high pressure hunting. Small woodlots, and there's a bunch of guys in each woodlot type thing. So probably about 10 years ago, and I'm 40 now, so I've been hunting 28 years. Probably about 10 years ago, I started hunting primarily public land, and found out real quick that deer are super, super educated up here. They're so pressured, and so every little thing matters when you're hunting them. And one of the things that really I figured out was noise was a big issue with getting encounters versus not. That was kind of one of the deciding factors. So kind of got into that. Long story short, did a lot of research with that. Did some research through the University of Toledo on hunter noises and how loud they are and how far they will carry. And from that, started a company called Sound Barrier to try to help with that issue for hunters, based on just stuff, I wanted to help myself and eliminate that problem. And so I kind of snowballed from there with that company, and then a bunch of articles also that are written on that to just try to solve that problem, the noise problem for hunters that, like you said, most hunters know, okay, yeah, obviously deer can hear, and they probably hear pretty well, but most hunters don't know much about it or focus on it, which is a really key mistake because it's one of the three senses, that they have to detect us. So that's kind of what I want to focus on, and it's helped me out quite a bit, just learning about it and trying to apply that, to the hunting scenario.
Absolutely. It sounds. I'm sure when we made that intro, it kind of sounded funny to people that were talking about sound because it's such a no-brainer. But I poured over your website, and you've got a lot of this information up there, and I encourage people to go take a look at it. Before we kind of talk about how a deer reacts to sound, can you kind of break down why sound is such a critical asset? Like the ability to detect sound is something a deer is so good at.
Deer can hear really well in three different ways, and I'll kind of compare it to humans and how we hear because that's the easiest thing to do. But there's only really one way that they're similar to humans, and that would be the loudness, what they perceive as loudness like we do. So they can't hear they can't hear like a mouse at a mile away,
Mm-hmm.
Loud to them is loud to us, soft to them is soft to us. But there's three big ways that they hear much better that we need to, really consider when we're thinking about all aspects of hunting, and especially with bow hunting. And like I said, I do a lot of public land hunting where I'm getting in really close to where these deer are, and bed area hunting and stuff. And this stuff is really magnified when you get in those close ranges. So loudness is about the same for them, but the first thing that's really different is the most obvious one, which is their outer ear called the pinnae. some people pinna or pinna, but that's the big outer ear, right? And deer can move it. Obviously we can't move our ears. It's a very big funnel, basically. They can rotate it in any direction. They can hone in on where noises come from. And that's a huge advantage to not only hearing sounds and slight sounds, that are funnel those into their eardrum, but also pinpointing where they come from. And so that's a huge, huge benefit. And we've probably all seen deer, when we're out hunting. They can pick up sounds. They hear loudness about the same, but they can pick up sounds that we don't a lot easier. And we've probably all seen, been hunting and seen deer just like whip their heads around and start looking off a certain direction, and we don't hear anything, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, something comes into view that we didn't hear, and we finally hear. Maybe it's another deer, or maybe it's a hunter or something like that. But that's one huge benefit the deer have over us, is that outer ear. And kind of a sidebar off that is, I wrote a whole article on this in North American Whitetail about the link between hearing and sight, and how noises and the hearing is a trigger sense for the eyes. The eyes, scan well. It's probably their least effective sense for deer, but they can see, about 300 degrees or so horizontally. But their trigger for their eyes is them hearing something. Without that, they don't really know where to look or what to look for, and they aren't really alerted to things. And so noise becomes a real big issue just in that sense, that they can hone in on, and then they can scrutinize it with their eyes. So that's a huge advantage they have.
So do they hear the same, oh man, this is where you come in because you're going to correct me after this. Do they hear the same range of noises?
No, range is totally different. I'll get to that. That's like the second part.
Okay.
The second thing. But it's more like the loudness, or it's measured in sound pressure or decibels, right?
Right.
They hear that about the same. So if we hear like this, kind of soft noise in the woods, it would be soft to them as well.
Okay.
It's not like they have magnified hearing,
Gotcha.
Their outer ear, though, just helps them detect it and funnel it better than ours do.
Right. So it's kind of like whenever we would stick our hand up behind our ear and try to make a funnel ourselves, so the deer just already has that built-in mechanism for them to be able to do that.
And obviously they can rotate them independently, and just like radar, they can focus in on where did that come from, and then instantly know where that noise came from. Where us, it's sometimes a little harder to figure out.
That makes sense.
Oh yeah, there's been a bunch of sounds in the woods where I'm just like, where did that come from? Like either a gunshot or anything, and I'm like, I think it came from over there, and then you got somebody standing beside you. I was like, I think it came from the exact opposite side. So, I mean, that I could see how that would be an advantage for a deer, like you said, that they can just point that ear in whatever direction, and then bam, they probably. And I know they have it locked on because you got to think about when people are out in the woods, and a lot of you see this all the time where somebody does like a rattling sequence or a grunt, and the deer comes to basically the tree that they're in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that has to be all a part of that, right?
Yeah, and from hundreds of yards away, right? They
right
the exact tree you're in. Yeah, so that's a huge thing right there. The second thing you just brought up is what I call the sweet spot, but that's the range that they hear in, which is much different. I'm citing a University of Toledo deer study here, but deer can hear from about 200 to 64,000 hertz. That's the frequency range that they can hear, which is really broad. To compare that to human, we can hear from about 20 to 20,000. And probably 16,000, most of us can't hear much above that. So wow. It's about a third of what a deer's range is. And also where they hear best is different than humans. We hear between 2 and 4,000 hertz. That's like speech level, which makes sense that we hear best there. Deer hear best around 8,000 hertz. So it's, similar, but it's a little bit shifted higher. And the interesting thing is that when I compared all these test noises that I did. We did about 30 different test noises, like crunching leaves, breaking twigs, clanging metal, like your tree stand, your climbing sticks, all this stuff. We did about 30 different hunter noise tests. We had a frequency analysis of that. And the interesting thing is, a lot of those natural woods sounds, that we make, that a predator would make, they fall within that where deer hear the best. So 8 to 10,000 hertz or so. They kind of peak in that general area. So they not only hear much wider frequency range, they hear best in the noises that we would make that would, tip them off.
Oh God, that's terrible.
Well, it's terrible for hunters. It's just not terrible for the deer. That's how they've been able to make it this long.
It's like not only can they pinpoint. I mean, because I had that happen with a deer last year. I did a doe in heat, and a doe came from clear 250 yards away to the base of my tree. It's on the YouTube channel, and it blew my mind that she was able to pinpoint me. But I mean, she ears were up, and she was coming right to me the whole time. But that also means that every time I've been walking through the woods, and I thought, dang, I did a pretty good job of sneaking in here, I probably didn't do near as good a job as I thought.
Yeah, and some of those, this on our website, we've got some of them listed. But for example, and it really depends on where you're at and the environmental conditions. But if it's like really calm out, and the leaves are really crunchy, and you're walking through leaves and crunching them pretty good, that can travel 400 or 500 yards. So we've heard that before too. If a deer's coming, we can hear it like really far away if the conditions are right. So. It definitely travels, and they're hearing it. It's just interesting that it falls right where they're best suited to hear it. And so I mean, again, it matters, right? It matters, this idea of paying attention to the noises we make, and we can get to that in a minute. But that's the second area, that they hear better than humans. And the third one I kind of alluded to there is this idea that they can hear much higher than we can. So they have ultrasonic hearing. So they can, where ours cuts off at 16 to 20,000 hertz, that's the highest pitch we can hear. Theirs keeps going to 64,000. And when you look at these noises we make, it isn't that, for example, the one I have here is goldenrod. So we tested goldenrod breaking, like you're walking through goldenrod field or something, and it's kind of dry and crunchy. The frequency range goes from down toward the bottom of their range, 200, and it goes through what we hear, and it still is high up through about 60,000 hertz. So they're hearing. There's all this noise made of these different frequencies that we don't even hear, but they can hear it. So they're hearing a much broader range than we are. And a lot of these high frequency noises is what deer use to pinpoint the sources and then look, scrutinize with their eyes. Those high frequency ones just are better to do that with. When you look at the science of how their ears are on their head, and the distance between their ears, it's the higher frequency ones that help them pinpoint. So those three things are huge advantages they have. We make noise or frequencies of noises that we don't even hear that they can hear. So it makes it tough.
Yeah, and it also makes me, it kind of maybe explains why on windy days deer, this is totally unrelated perhaps, but why deer act as jumpy as they are, because they're hearing a lot more noise than we are. I wonder if that's overwhelming to them.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a good theory.
Yeah. No, we'll follow that along in the BS theory catalog until proven otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've always kind of found like weird or whatnot is, like, say if we're walking through the woods and, like, say we alert deer, we don't see them. Obviously, they're probably running off or whatever, they're sneaking out. But then there'll be these times where a deer will be out in front of you, and then, like, say, it'll pick its head up and it'll just start looking into the woods, and it'll do that for a while. Minutes could pass, And then finally, all of a sudden, another deer steps out. And like I said, we never heard that deer. I mean, they come in all stealthy like, but it seems like they heard that other deer from a long ways off, or maybe they picked up the scent or whatever. Not, I mean, how low is that? Like a deer walking through the woods.
Like if it's crunching through leaves, let's say it's obviously making frequencies that you'd be able to hear, and ones that go up and beyond that, which would be in the ultrasonic. So where they're exactly keying in on that, that's that 8,000 hertz where they hear best, and then above that helps them pinpoint it. So it's really all these things I think going together. They're hearing that frequency range better than we are. They have the outer ear that can really funnel that to their hearing or their eardrum, and then obviously the ultrasonic, the stuff we can't hear, that helps them pinpoint that and hear it or detect it before we definitely can.
Right. And how did they? I guess they've just developed it over time. Just associate danger to that, because I'm sure there's got to be something in there where there all of a sudden there's a noise that, okay, that's danger. I need to get out of here, or oh, that's just a normal noise that I hear all the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I know obviously in the woods there's natural sounds that they are used to. That doesn't alert them, and then there's unnatural ones that, well, what is that? And it's like the cadence of a walk. Does that set them off? Obviously, unnatural noises like metal or plastic things like that, I think would cause more alert for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely metal. I've noticed that way too many times. I think there was this one time I was watching. There was this buck chasing this doe, and I could hear him for a little bit, but didn't have a clear shot or anything yet. And then she finally runs out into the open, and then I'm trying to get adjusted for a shot. I was hunting with a gun, and I had a shooting stick like on this tripod stand, and I moved the stick a little bit and kind of clanked the metal, a little bit of metal that was on the bottom. And I mean, the buck was like, I mean, he was hauling behind her, and then when he heard that noise, he instantly like locked the brakes up, and was like, no. I'm not going out in the open. Just by hearing that little bit of noise, he locks up and then completely turns around. And this was a rutted buck, like chasing a doe around. So I was like, man, it's crazy how they can key in on that specific noise and go, nope, that's danger. I'm not willing to put my life at risk for that little bitty noise, and then just turn around and go away. But I actually ended up shooting him later because he actually circled back around and tried to cut a different way. But I always thought that was crazy on how they're like, that's a dangerous noise, because I'm just assuming it's just not natural in the woods. That's not a natural noise that they hear all the time.
Right. Yeah, some sort of alarm goes off, and this is kind of interesting, kind of a side story, but it was kind of eye-opener for me when this happened to me. So maybe about 8 years ago or so, I hunt in Michigan and I hunt in Ohio. And I was down in Ohio, and it was one of those days that was a little bit windy and a little bit rainy, but not real bad. And I was kind of sneaking up this hill in the woods to go up toward this ridge top where it seems good sign, and where deer kind of bedded on the top of this ridge where it got thick. And I snuck up in there. I had a climber, and I snuck in. I climbed up a tree about 25 feet, and I looked down, and like 35 yards away, there were two doe bedded down, just sitting there looking my direction, chewing their cud. And I didn't see them the whole time, but I know they were there. And it was super odd to me, because I was in plain view while I walked in and climbed up the tree, but I realized that they didn't hear me. There was enough wind and, kind of wet conditions. They could not hear me. And therefore, the movement that I was making, it didn't set off a trigger for them to really, look at me. There was enough, motion with the wind, and I must have kind of blended in with that enough. But they didn't hear anything, and therefore that did not trip their eyesight. so to say. Did not trigger it.
Hmm.
And that was a huge eye opener for me, just about what noises do for deer. It's kind of like, again, this trigger that says, oh, pay attention. Something's, you better check that out with your eyeballs or something like that. And I've had other circumstances where I've walked. One time I was in a field, or walked into this field. I was scouting. I had like blue jeans on and a camo top, and there was this smaller buck out in this field, and I was in the middle of the field. He was in the middle of the field, and so I just stopped. And there was like 100 yards between us, and I was just sticking out like a sore thumb. But he just kept coming right toward me, and I just stood there, and obviously couldn't hear me, right? He could clearly see me, but without something to jar his nervous system, like a sound, he almost walked right up on me until I started, moving around like crazy, waving my arms, and he finally saw me. So that was just a big aha moment for me that, wow, sound is a big deal to deer, that we really need to pay attention to.
Right. And I think there are some sounds that maybe we could try to mimic as well, maybe like when we're getting up, because I know I've had this happen with like climbers and stuff where you're going up in a climber, you're rubbing up on the tree, and then a deer comes to investigate what was making that noise. It didn't alert them to leave. It alerted them enough, like a curiosity noise. But who knows, maybe it sounded like another buck rubbing on a tree, because I know this past season I was sitting there, I was watching this little buck, and he was in front of me, and there was this little sapling, and then all of a sudden he just like starts tickling his antlers on this little sapling, kind of rubbing it a little bit, and it was during the rut time, and I watched this buck come from a couple of 100 yards away, and it was one of those, like he was on a mission to see what was making that noise. Came in with his neck back, and his hair was all puffed out and everything, looking to fight. And then when he finally got there and saw what was there, then he just like looked at it. The little buck actually ended up like trying to lick him, like, "Hey man, I don't want to fight. I'm just over here doing my thing. I'm not ready to fight you or anything." And he was a buck that he needed to make it another year. But I was just like, and there was thick woods there. It was kind of windy. It was thick woods where he ended up coming from. But I was like, how did he hear that? Because I mean, I'm right on top of it, like 10 yards away, and I could barely hear him making a noise with his antlers rubbing up against that little sapling. So I was just like, wow, they've definitely got some. There's definitely something going on there with their hearing that's just way above a level that I understand.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, Chase, I had one that kind of borders the two of those. What you just said. When I was hunting private land, I want to put that disclosure on there because I'm sure the circumstances are different on heavily pressured public land. This wasn't. I was walking in with a light rain, which I think probably does that register similarly to leaves, like wind and whatnot? Do you think?
As far as like what they're hearing, or
Like, yeah. Does it sound the same as me walking through the woods? Does it have that masking property?
yeah, well,
You
I
think?
think rain is a great masker. As far as
Okay.
it's obviously the leaves aren't crunchy, and that
Sure.
noise is going to mask to a certain extent noises you make. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm walking to the stand, and I had my little super dim red light on, and I caught some eyes off in the corner, and I was only about, I don't know, 30 yards from my tree stand, but I was moving in real slow, and I managed to get to the tree, climb up the tree, and come sunlight, I could see those two deer still bedded over there chewing their cud. And about, I don't know, an hour or so goes by, the sun really starts to come up, and I realize I'm completely silhouetted on this tree because of the way the sunlight was coming through, and it was probably going to stay that way for a minute. So I actually took my climber and like real carefully climbed up the tree a little further, and both of those deer, by this time the rain had quit and I was on a pine tree, both of those deer heard that noise and came walking down the path and then looked up the tree. So it was a real interesting curiosity, but it was interesting to me that they were able to, not only isolate that, but also that it didn't like initially have that revolting component to it, because I'd be willing to bet, Chase, along your theory of them hearing metal, I think it's probably like a what the heck is that factor. You know, like when they hear it, they don't necessarily have to know it's danger. It can just be like, that was really disconcerting. I doesn't belong in this environment, and it just creates an uneasy feeling.
Probably. I mean, I've actually been on public and had deer come straight to the tree that I got up in my climber. Like it was, I got up in the climber, and it's
Right.
about the second I'm going to sit down, I look down, and there's a deer. I've had does and stuff like literally on the tree that I was going up in the climber.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely curious, and those noises not being real loud, obviously them still hearing them, but those are more natural sounds. It's like is that a raccoon going up a tree? Is that a squirrel?
Sure.
That those type of things. They definitely know where they're at. They just might not know what they are.
Right.
Right. Well, you may have touched on this. I'm still digesting like all the different scenarios that I can like digesting what you said and applying it to scenarios I can think of. Where does metal fall on this spectrum?
Metal's the worst. If you look at the actual spectrum and of our homepage at the bottom, we have kind of a chart that goes through that. But metal being unnatural, that's probably not a curiosity sound they're going to come check out, like you were saying with that example of the shooting stick or whatever making a noise and just them bolting. That's kind of the typical reaction, just super unnatural noise, And it's also something that we tested, like hollow climbing sticks, if they clang against each other, camera arm, which is more steel, at least the one we tested, tree steps, stuff like that. Some of that can travel over half a mile in the right conditions. So it's super unnatural. It can travel a long ways, and so that's like death knell. That's like the worst possible noise to make, I guess. But
Right. Yeah, because that deer was probably 100 yards away. So, and it wasn't like just a hard. It was just a quick little metallic sound. But I'm like, I mean, it like I said, it stopped him dead in his tracks, and he was 100 yards away whenever I made that noise. Yeah, metal's a no-no. It seems like it's a big no-no. And then after that, I went and put some carpet down in the bottom of that. I'm like, no, this ain't happening. This ain't happening again.
Man, I'm looking at this chart. I mean, basically, what I hear you saying and what I see this chart saying is certain noises not only can ruin not could they ruin a hunt. I mean, realistically, you more or less could blow an area out with the wrong noise.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you hunt, I know some areas of the country, I've heard a lot of guys talk about this, or you're more forgiving than others, but especially here in Michigan, what I found, and I think it's primarily true for deer in general, that you just don't get a lot of chances at, especially mature bucks. And if you're in there tight, let's say you go into bedding or something, and you make a noise that they can associate with something, maybe you can get away with a little bit of that bark noise with your climber or something. But if you make a noise like some metal clanging or whatever, it's not an issue of, oh, I didn't make 10 of them. But, if you make one of those, a smart deer that's, not a year and a half old, he's not going to come out that way. I've had too many circumstances and failures of my own, and that's, kind of what led to all this, to know that, you put in all this effort, you get in this spot, and then your stand makes a noise, or you screw up and make a noise, and then it's over. Like, you don't see anything. You wonder why, this area that looks so good, you're just not seeing anything. And yeah, you can totally ruin a hunt or a spot just by an errant noise, just one little mistake. Because if they have a question about it, they're not going to just be dumb and walk under your stand type thing. So I think a lot of times we fool ourselves to think that, I can get away with this or that, and that's really not the case.
Right. I think it would be beneficial as if you have a buddy that isn't worried about sound is that you get on the downwind side of him and let him come in and set up, and then you just set up and watch the deer funnel your direction.
Right. Just don't tell them.
Yeah, it's just like, hey man, I love hunting with you. I'll have the best of luck whenever you're in the woods.
You're hunting your buddies doing a deer drive.
Hey man, a lot of guys. I mean, I hear that happening all the time. Where guys, and they're doing it with more than just noises. They're doing it like wind bumping and things that you see.
Right.
It's just another strategy to try, man. A lot of these deer, man, they're hard to kill, and it sounds like if you go in and you're making these noises that we had, who was it? David Ebright on the show, and he made a noise and he just quit hunting that day. Like the second he made that noise, he just said, "Bump it, I'm done. I'm not even going to hunt today," and left. So
yeah,
I've had hunts like that where you go in and you have a noisy setup, and then it's just a wasted hunt. And I've sat through those hunts where I've been like, "This is futile," but you sit it out anyways, and then at the end of 2-3 hours, you're like, "Yeah, that was futile. That was a waste." And so I guess you get enough of those that it really trains you to really pay attention to soundproofing your gear for one thing, and then just being super cautious as you enter and exit and every step along the way.
Yeah. I think one of the only times that you could probably get away with some noise is probably during the rut when deer are traveling so far and moving. I mean, you could have a deer that was a mile away when you set up that morning that could come strolling through hours later. But if you're trying to hunt beds, buck beds, and trying to get real close to the bedroom and all that stuff, then I think everything comes into play, where your scent, the noise you're making, all of that, I think is just a huge factor in being able to actually lay eyes on that deer.
Yep. And you don't want to count on that either. You don't want to hunt and say, well, I'm going to count on this buck coming from a mile away.
Oh, yeah.
That's, nobody would do that. But, yeah, we could get lucky sometimes, because of that type of thing. Everybody probably has. It's hunted long enough. But, yeah, it's definitely something to pay attention to because the rut's really the only time that's probably going to happen.
Right. And that's not a very long time. It's like 2 weeks, or for the most part, a week, 2 weeks of time. In Florida, maybe a little bit longer, depending on where you're hunting at, but because our rut's so widespread. But
when is your rut down there?
Well, we have a map. It's funny, if you go look at the Florida rut map, it is like all over. It's like county by county. Like it's not even. I'm in my area. They seem to rut more towards the end of October-ish area, but where Walter's at, it could be like late January, early January through February.
Really?
Where he's at? Yeah, up in the Panhandle. So, and then down in South Florida, it's like July, August. Like literally, the rut's fixing to start kicking off in South Florida in about a month.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. It's I can hunt the rut here from about October 15th, and if I wanted to drive a little bit further west, October 15th to about early February.
Wow.
I actually had a doe. Oh, Chase, hold me to this. Make sure I'm not exaggerating. Didn't I send you a video or tell you that I got a video of a doe being bred behind the house like February 14th last year?
Right. Yeah. In Florida, it's all they're already hard horned in South Florida. That's if you want to talk about that. Like they're already hard horned down there. And my bucks won't get hard horned till like around the end of August, 1st of September, and then where Walter's at, some of them they won't be hard horned till after like around October. Ish area.
Yeah, early October. Yeah, it's
Florida.
It's weird,
just a
man.
weird
This
state,
place is
man.
weird.
That's wild. I mean, not to get off track here, but that's kind of interesting. I wonder if it's because you don't have really seasons, and it just messes up the cycle.
Well, I mean, it's all based on eye. It's all based on the amount of light that hits the eye. I think what it really stems from is when during the 20th century when we basically annihilated deer we had to restock deer, and I think that my area got 4 different states worth of deer. And I think anytime you take a native population and you start to, cross it, even though they're not that big of a difference between them, I think that has a lot to do with it. And also, if you go from where I am to the tip of Florida, you're a heck of a lot closer to the equator. I mean, you're talking like 10 hours worth of driving. So, your sunlight when the correct amount of sunlight to trigger the rut is just different down there.
Yeah, it's
But
bizarre. And who knows? I know some ruts are affected by flooding and things like that. From what I've heard,
sure.
is deer, like during, I guess in the past, where the areas have generally flooded certain times to where, okay, the fawns have to be born at this time to avoid that flood period to be able to survive. So in South Florida, that could be a major factor.
Yeah, so it's a weird place.
It's
So before I start thinking about the applications of what we've talked about, do you have another like evolution of thought to what we've been discussing?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well. Just the idea that, we obviously make noise. That's one of 3 major senses that deer use to stay alive, right? And keep us from success.
Sure.
And it's something that a lot of guys don't think about, that we all really need to think about a lot and really plan around. Because it doesn't matter if they catch a whiff of you or if they hear one thing or see you, they're going to be gone.
So my thinking is the application of a product to mitigate this, because nothing that we buy is silent unless you're. In fact, the only piece of gear I know that's completely silent is that Sitka bag that has nothing but burlap. I mean, it's just like there's no buckles, there's no zippers, nothing. This seems like something that, as a saddle hunter or as a run and gun hunter, where you're moving and you don't have fixed sets. I think you wrote a blog piece on this. The run and gun hunter is at a particular disadvantage when it comes to mitigating sound versus a still hunter. You want to kind of maybe chat a little bit about that and expound?
Sure, yeah. I mean, being really close, right, it just magnifies every little mistake you make, right? So one of the things that I developed here, which is what Sound Barrier is about, is a product called Buck Bumper that you can add to your gear to silence it. So it's this self-adhesive wrap. You can wrap your sticks. You can wrap your parts of your stand. There's a thicker version you can put at contact points, but it's just super important. Any of those things that you can make contact with, you can make, those vibrations that translate to sound, that you eliminate that of the gear that you have. And so that's a really good way to do that. We've done a bunch of testing with it compared to other products that are out there, like the moleskin stuff, that it just is more effective because of what it's made out of, to eliminate those clangs, those hunt busters for guys, whether you hunt just with a normal hang-on stand or whatever, or you're a really intense run and gunner. You need that protection. You've got to eliminate that sound. So that's one thing that I suggest and that I do with all my gear, is just cover everything that I do have so it can't. So you're going to clang it. You're going to bump something. But you've got to protect yourself so when that happens, it's not making noise. So that's one huge thing. The other thing I do and would recommend is just eliminating junk that you don't need. There's a lot of stuff in our packs, in our setups, that if we're honest about it, we probably don't need, that is just another opportunity to make noise. And if you can get away without it, if you don't really need it, then just, I'd say, get rid of it, right? The rest of the stuff, soundproof it, right, if it's a necessity. But even things like on gear that aren't necessary, like I have a backpack that has these plastic buckles that, I can strap it around my waist or I can do whatever. And I don't use those, so I'm just going to cut them off, right? They just find a way when I strap it to the stand or on my back, they just find a way to to find something else to clang against, So remove them, take them off. Another thing, like guys that have saddles, is going through that. And obviously you can't be cutting stuff off that if it's a safety, thing. But so you got to soundproof it somehow. Even things like, honestly, I hate when I'm hunting out of regular stands. I hate wearing harnesses because there's metal buckles and junk on them that always find a way to, my bow hit it or something. So either I silence those or find a way to, cover them up or something. But those are two huge things: is silencing the gear you got to take and eliminating stuff that you don't need.
Right.
When I went out to Colorado, my uncle said people pack their insecurities, and I went through and I purged my pack of all the different duplicates and all the different things I didn't need. And I'm sitting here now thinking, man, I bet you I can take that 10-pound whitetail pack I've got and probably get rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, most of the time I won't. If depending on how long the hunt's going to be for that day or whatever, I won't even carry anything in. I'm like, no, I'm not even carrying a backpack because I don't know how many times I've had my backpack like fall out of the tree onto the ground or just make noises, or there's just stuff in there that's like loose in there that'll make a noise or whatnot. So I'm just like, nope, I'm not even going to carry that in because I don't need it. I don't need all that stuff for this 2-hour hunt that I'm going to do. I don't need a backpack that's going to get me through like 2 weeks out in the wilderness or something with every little thing, fire starter. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff that are in the packs that you're just like, why am I bringing
2 gallons of sweet tea?
Yeah. Why am I bringing all this stuff for like a 2-hour sit or something? So yeah, definitely makes sense. And there's probably some things that I could definitely use some of the sound barrier, some of your tape and things like that, that I just have been putting off because I'm like, well, I don't make really any noises with those things, but then every now and then you'll make that noise and you're like, man, why didn't I go ahead and soundproof that stuff? Because then because I think it's a confidence thing too. Because when you're going in and you're super quiet, then your confidence is sky high. But then, like I said, when you make that one little metal noise or whatever else, then it just kind of starts putting a damper on the entire hunt. So if for anything, just do it for confidence.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And, like I said, you can be as careful as possible. And that's part of it too. I've got an article posted where I go through, I think about seven things that, you can do. And part of it is, just being real careful, being real mindful of everything you're doing. But we're humans, right? We make mistakes. We can't avoid it. And usually, it's happening at the worst possible time that something happens, right? So you minimize that as much as possible, but then at the end of the day, you're going to make a mistake at some point, and that's when something like this helps you. It just eliminates the chance to make a mistake that you'll regret, right?
But on a side note, when we're talking about the walking in the woods and being quiet and stuff, it is so hard for me to be able to do that. Like I know people that'll get up and they'll get up like an extra 2 hours just to be able to walk. It takes them like almost 2 hours to walk into the woods. To get to their stand, and I'm more like the guy that's like beeline. I'm like straight. I mean, it's almost painful for me to sit there. I know it's probably beneficial to be able to do that, but it's almost one of those things where I'm just like I just can't make myself do it. I just can't make myself do it to be able to go in there. And it's not. I mean, I've had success, so but I do feel like I try to. What I've done with that is I'll try to find better ways to get in than take that route where I know I can get in super quiet. If that'll take me 2 hours, but I'll go, okay, well, if I access from this way, I can get in there faster, and I try to like clear things out of the way and do things that'll be like, okay, I won't have to worry about that as well. So it's just one of those things where I just don't know if I'll ever be able to hunt a buck bed because of the amount of time it would take me to get to the tree.
I'm that guy that gets up 2 hours early, by the way. But it's not just the noise component of it. It's also the heat. I'm trying to move pretty slow where I'm going. But, my dad taught me two things about deer hunting that he was 100% right about, and one of those was, from the sounds of it, one of those is you want the woods to have time to rest from the noises you made, but also, Adam, I don't know if you've ever been told this before or in your discussions about controlling sound. It's been brought up, but he swears to pick your foot straight up and put it straight down. The heel to toe gait that humans have just stands out. There's nothing in the woods besides maybe a possum that makes a noise anything remotely close to that, and you don't want yourself to stand out.
I'm not sure about that one. It makes sense. I do know that kind of what both you're saying is true, and I think it depends on the scenario, like where you're hunting. If you're getting in somewhere where the deer are going, it's like a transition area, and you can get in there quickly before they're going to come through, then I think you can get in there walking quicker than if you are hunting and making your way in real close to a buck bed or something like that, or bedding area. And in that case, going super slow would be really important. So I think
Sure.
It is dependent on the situation and just knowing what that is. I do know that going slow though, like when I'm hunting in, somewhere usually is somewhere pretty thick and I'm getting pretty close to deer, I always just go super slow, almost like I'm stalking, because you kind of think of you stepping on leaves, for example, as like an impact, like leaves and twigs. So if you do it quickly, you've got all the leaves crunching and all the potential twigs breaking at once, and that's making a louder noise than if you like put your foot down slowly and it's doing one at a time almost, and all those are going to be smaller and it's going to not be as loud of a noise. So going super slow, like stalking your way in somewhere, if you can have the time to do that, is always going to be quieter than running in there. But you've got to figure out, one of the things is, okay, do I have enough time to do that, and making sure you do, but also you don't want to run into deer in the process, unless you're get the jump on them. So
Sure.
but going slow definitely is a quieter approach.
Right. Well, how do we sound like a squirrel? Like, is there any way we can go fast and sound exactly like a squirrel going through the woods? Because the squirrels don't seem to bother them.
Yeah, or chickadee or something.
Or an armadillo or something, because they all make noises. I mean, it's just getting our noise to sound exactly like that going through the woods.
Yeah, I've heard of guys that claim they can sound like a deer walking or something, because of their gait, and that supposedly doesn't trigger deer, even though I think they would still look that way, which kind of defeats the purpose there. But I don't know. My philosophy, at least at the moment, is I just try not to let them hear me at all.
Anti-gravitational boosters. He just floats into his spot and just
that would be that'd be ideal.
That would be nice. That would be nice. What about these quiet cats and things like that? Are those really that big of an advantage? Because I mean, what kind of noise are those putting off in the woods? Because I know that I've like golf carts and things like that, and obviously they're a little bit bigger, but I've had instances where, say, you're waiting on a buddy or something to come pick you up in a golf cart from your stand, and you have deer out in front of you. And the deer, I've seen this happen where I'm looking at some does or whatnot, and then they all of a sudden pick their head up and run off. And then just a little bit later, up comes this golf cart over a hill that you finally start hearing from a ways away. That was an electric golf cart that they got alerted to. So are these quiet cats or electric carts or whatnot, are they really that big of a difference for people?
I can't really speak to that because I've never used them. I think just the very face value idea of, hey, if you're going to use a gas-powered four-wheeler versus an electric, it's quieter, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, if Quiet Cat wants to send me one, I guess I would, but
I'm sure they're listening.
And honestly, we're at, yeah. where I hunt public, I couldn't use it anyways because
Right.
just they won't let you
Sure.
ride down these trails, with any type of thing. So the only argument I've heard, and I don't know if these people are sponsored or not, so it's kind of hard to know if it's true or not, but is the idea of getting in somewhere quickly versus walking slowly, over time. You just get there quicker and quieter, and it's less overall impact than if you're going in, and making noise for half an hour versus 5 minutes.
Right.
Sure. I wonder if there's an argument to be made though that something that kind of sounds like it's walking towards you, like a real slow heel to toe. I wonder if can you be quiet enough to where you don't sound like something coming, or is it better just to make everything, even though it's louder, to make that sharp, quick poop of your foot, and the deer's like, I think I heard that, but they can't really focus in on it. Maybe I'm overthinking it, as all deer hunters do, but you know, it makes me wonder because everybody's heard somebody sneak into the cookie jar, and you hear the jar kind of gently open over a period of time. Whereas if they just whipped it open, would you notice it quite as quickly? I don't know.
That's a good question. For me, just off the top of my head, I would say it's more of a issue of not if they hear it, but how far it'll travel. If
That's a
if
good
I
point too.
hear, the sharp foot down, let's say that travels 80 yards, and the slow foot down travels 50 yards, it depends on where deer are within that radius. If they're within 20 yards, they're going to hear either. If they're at, somewhere in between those two, they would hear the one but not the other. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah. I think the important part here is don't make certain noises and mitigate any noises that you make, knowing that they're all detrimental. Could be
Right.
detrimental rather. We can all agree on that. So I'm interested, Chase. Unless you got more questions, I kind of want to talk about his tape.
No, let's talk about the tape.
All right, cool, good deal. So question number one. I noticed that it's more thick than moleskin or other, athletic tape. Does it hold on to water?
It doesn't. No, it's foam
Okay.
based. It doesn't soak up water. We have two thicknesses. One is a wrap, which is pretty thin. It's comparable, I'd say, to moleskin. Um,
Okay.
and you can wrap pretty much anything with that. Your sticks. I put some on my bow, different parts of my bow. I've had people put it on buckles and even their release. Um, but that'll wrap around anything. It's the thin version. And then we have the thick version that it's quite a bit thicker. It's an eighth of an inch, which is more for flat surfaces. A good application of that would be underneath your tree stand seat. When you fold it up, it's always, metal on metal type situation.
Sure.
So you can put pieces on there strategically so it's not metal on metal and that's not making noise. So between the two, you can usually soundproof anything you want to, and just figure out which one would work better for that, I guess, scenario.
Is this a material that is moldable? For instance, if I have an angle or a sharp angle on something, can I put it on one side and expect it to really hold on that other side as well? Because that's some of the issues I have with some of the moleskin alternatives is through just sheer exposure to wind, rain, sun, and shine and everything. It seems like the most difficult parts to silence, they just don't accept a weak adhesive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong adhesive. You're gonna want to clean the surface off real good. Make sure it's dry. Make sure well, you shouldn't have a problem in Florida, but make sure it's not really cold out when you apply it. But once it's on there, it's a permanent adhesive. We usually do not have a problem with it coming off.
Okay.
If you want to get it off, that's usually the problem. But it usually sticks where it's put pretty good.
And is this something that you recommend, taping your whole stand? Because I know you've got a stand and sticks combo that you sell, and you're hitting all the key points. If we're trying to mitigate noise, are we playing the odds game and trying to isolate places where, contact is most likely, or do all your tree stands just say sound barrier?
I guys can do what they want. I would not personally. I haven't done this. Wrap my entire tree stand in it. I would use, like I said, some stuff under the seat so that you can't have metal on metal contact. If there's a spot like maybe around the rim of the seat that you feel, the bow could hit this, put some there, right?
Sure.
On the tree stand, I just hit spots, and that's what that combo is designed to do, was be to hit those contact points on the stand, and then it gives you the thinner wrap for wrapping the whole stick. Sticks for me
Gotcha.
have more opportunity with buckles and things to get metal on metal, and you're typically using your sticks more often, I guess, and there's more opportunity there. So you can completely wrap one of those, pretty much the whole all surfaces on that with the thinner version is called buck bumper.
Gotcha.
Okay, so a little bit. So you got a buck bumper and a buck bumper thick.
Correct.
Are your two products?
Kind of hard to say.
Buck bumper is mainly for your sticks and stuff.
In your
buckles.
That's
what
the
you're saying.
thinner. That's the thinner wrap.
And your camera arms.
Gotcha.
Maybe. Okay. And then the thick stuff maybe for the stands.
Contacts points, shooting rails, stuff like that. If you have a blind or like a shooting rail on a permanent stand, something like that. One of those ladder stands, they could work good there.
One of the things that hunters are really good at is being really stingy in weird ways with their money. I've done that. I've been there, and whenever I try and spend money, I try and buy an advantage. I try and buy. If I'm going to spend money, it needs to do something exceptionally well. And so if we're buying a sound concealment product, can you touch on, we're going to obviously include a link in the bio for everybody to go to your website and read everything you've got, but can you kind of talk to everybody about what your product has accomplished in testing?
Yeah, so testing, and we have this on our homepage. We kind of took, our main competitor is the moleskin, so we kind of compared it against that. We did a bunch of testing with playing stuff against it, and honestly, because we wanted to know how it measured up, and through the testing, it outcompeted, it outperformed moleskin type products, and it just boils down to what it's made out of, really. It's that closed cell foam type product that has different layering on it as well, but it's designed to absorb impacts. It's designed to absorb, sound. So it outperformed in that case. The thick, obviously, a little better than buck bumper, but both outperformed moleskin type products. And so, I've been using it for probably 5 years now. We've had it for sale. I've been using it actually before then. And I started with like hockey tape type stuff. I know guys use that. And it works okay, right? The moleskin stuff works okay, but I wanted something a little better, and so this definitely does outperform that stuff. And so we're pretty happy with it. It lasts pretty long. I've had it on my sticks for probably 4 years now. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it depends, obviously, on how much you use them and how much abuse you give it, but it holds up pretty good. It stays put pretty good. And so it definitely gives, again, a little advantage that can be a big deal,
That's interesting. I think that this is going to be one of those things that as people progress through the podcast, I think there's a chance we're going to have some people that are like, oh, sound's not that big a deal. And by the time it's all said and done, I wonder how many of those people, and you guys write me and let me know if you're one of these people and brave enough to admit it, is looking at their gear now and wondering what areas can I silence, because I have a feeling all of my carabiners and everything are going to be like wrapped to the tee to just to eliminate noise. Because I bet you I've ruined more hunts than I realize.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's hard to know. That if I go out and sit and I don't see anything, or the deer that I do see are acting weird, is that because of me, right? Did I do something? Is it that
Right.
noise I made or not? And I just know, since I've been taking precautions in general with, being super concerned about noises I make, I have had way more success than I did before. And so for me, that's a lot of proof that, hey, one little noise does make a difference. It can make the difference between having an encounter and not. And this is just part of that puzzle to give you as much advantage as possible.
Well, and I think if people are going to spend as much money and time as they do trying to control something like wind or scent, rather, I think this is a very how do I say this? A more surefire way of tilting the odds in your favor. The science is not necessarily conclusive when it comes to scent control. I'm sure I just upset half my listeners, but reducing noise, now that we know the capabilities of a deer, this seems like a very worthwhile investment of your time and resources.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's something you can't ignore.
Chase, you got anything else, or can I hit him with my parting question?
No, I learned a lot on this episode, and I'm glad you came on, and it opened my eyes and ears to realize that, hey, I need to pay more attention out in the woods, and every little thing that I do extra is going to make me have chances to be more successful in the woods.
Absolutely. Adam, do you have any parting thoughts? Anything that you wish we had covered that we didn't?
No, I think we covered quite a bit, and again, I really appreciate you guys taking time to have me on. I just say one thing to guys that are just, getting into hunting or not sure about, the sound thing, is just, I guess the challenge would be to just decide that you're not going to make noise anymore. A lot of guys kind of acquiesce to, I'm going to make some noise. Making that decision is the start to, I believe, becoming a much better hunter. Even though it'll take time, there's steps involved, but just making that decision to make that matter is a big step. So I guess that's my parting thought there.
Okay, good deal. So I have a parting question for you, sir. If you could go back to your earliest hunting self, now we have to ignore for the purpose of this the sound component of this, because that's just too easy of a answer to the question. But if you could go back to your earliest deer hunting self and impart one piece of wisdom that would change the way that you pursued whitetails for the future, what piece of wisdom would you go back and give yourself?
I would probably tell myself to start hunting public land.
Really?
Yeah, and here's why. So growing up, I've been hunting 28 years. The first 18 I hunted primarily private. The last 10 has been primarily public. And my hunting IQ, has skyrocketed since I've started hunting public land. And I think I know it's because it's so much more difficult, especially in Michigan, that you have to get better. You just have to. And so I wish I would have done it earlier, honestly. So I guess that's what I would tell the younger me.
That's awesome. Chase, I'm fairly certain we've never had that response.
No, we haven't.
And not from a guy like Michigan, right? Yeah, where it's proclaimed to be some of the hardest hunting in the country. I mean, like,
right.
Golly.
Yeah. Hey, that was a good one, though.
That's bold.
It's good to hear
different
answers anyways.
Well, good deal, man. Well, tell everybody where they can go to find everything Sound Barrier.
Yep, just check us out at soundbarrierhunting.com, and you can see our products there on our shop page. You can also check out our blog, which is pretty much on all things whitetail, and sign up for that there if you want to get that every couple weeks.
Heck yeah, man. Well, we appreciate you taking time, and hopefully after this deer season or during the deer season, once we've silenced everything and Pope and Youngs are popping out of every bush down here in Florida, we can have you back on and we can
That's
break it
right. All
down.
right. Oh, thanks, guys.
I appreciate you, bud.